sale. I can sell yours. I'm successful. Would you like to deal with me? And there's a picture. And some of these people are very successful, some are not. Some of the really successful ones, 5 or 10 years ago, weren't even in the business. So what separates them from other people? And that you can't figure out in a hand-holding babysitting class here, or having somebody reach over your shoulder and somehow guide you through these things, because this is a self-starter business. This doesn't work that way. Always remember, square peg, round hole. You can't force it if it doesn't fit. It just won't work, and it frustrates everybody.
Unless it's a big hole in a small square.
Yeah, well, but...
creative.
Yeah, creative, which is good, yeah. However way it's done, creative because people have gone through a series of things that keep them on their toes. This is an on-your-toes business. And that's all this is. And if you look at people 5 or 10 years in the business...
Can we get started, Doran?
They're the ones who are successful.
Doran, let's
we
get
sure
started.
can, but who's here?
Let's do it. Let's do it, because then we can do our next thing, right?
Well, I'm going to chime in on this because this is going to be the first thing I'm talking about.
Awesome.
We have people here. Why don't we go get them, first of all? There's people here
Luca.
who have total...
Luca, are you busy? He's on the phone. That's okay. He heard me present. He heard me present. And I have Drew on the line.
Yep.
And he's following along with my presentation. Okay.
Let's go.
So because of what you were talking about, I wanted to talk about a story before getting into how to list and sell commercial real estate. You're right. There is no specific way to get into an exclusive right to sell agreement. The way I got it was networking. And I happened to be a tenant rep for office space. I made an appointment to meet with an agent who was not an exclusive listing agent, but one that was advertising a property for lease. I got there 15 minutes early of the appointment, happened to meet the landlord, asked him for a tour. My tenant came by, gave her the tour, handed the landlord my business card, and remained in contact with him for several weeks. Just, you never know, asking him how's his property going, like his listing going, how's the agent. He finally reached out to me out of the blue and said, hey, I'm doing a video campaign for my property. And I said, can I come by and watch? So I brought with me a draft listing agreement because I thought that this would be a good opportunity to talk about why I would be a good agent and why it would be important to have an exclusive listing agreement. He agreed with my reasoning, signed it, and unfortunately, a month later, he decides to take it off market. However, I requested the compensation and got paid my commission. Not only did we become good friends and business partners for that short time, he referred me to a friend of his who was also a landlord who was having trouble for 9 months selling his building and leasing. I met with the landlord, gave him my exclusive listing agreement, he signed it, and here we are today with a $5.75 million property. If anyone's interested or has a buyer, let me know. Okay, so getting into my presentation. Oh, I forgot. It's this one. Okay, prospecting for commercial real estate listings. One of the first steps in the listing process is to define your market. Over your career as a commercial real estate broker, you'll be spending a lot of time and money marketing to your area of specialization, so it's important to get it right. A target market can be defined by the type of customer you intend to reach. You want to make sure that you're very comfortable working with whoever it is in your career, and you need to be excited about the people that you're working with. Another one would be the type of property you intend to list and sell, retail, office, which are the most prevalent, industrial, multifamily, hospitality, and land. And, of course, the geographical area in which you intend to work. I like to be near my home. Oh, I'm a little ahead. So let's discuss CRM systems. Which ones do you guys use? Doran?
I use what I continue to have used originally, and that is a technology-based system. The inspiration from that came from years back before the internet, and I can begin telling you about Peter Hacker, one of the more successful people in the business. Peter had a binder of 300 pages. He had put out a sheet of paper at the top, name of property, name of owner rather, address of property, picture of the property, tenants, one purchase for how much, who the tenants are, lease term, owner's birthday, children, wife, personal stuff about, and then on the back he would write, every time he called the owner, the date and what the topic was.
And that's what you do now.
And he had 300 buildings that he lived from very, very well. Hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in the 80s. When I was the...
So that's what you use, a binder,
yeah,
right now? You still have?
No, I'm not doing that anymore. When he came, I was the industrial manager at TRI, and then he took over from that because I was, kids were growing, and I'd rather be in the afternoon watching them play baseball and stuff rather than showing property. That was my choice. So I deliberately made less money and focused less on the business and more on that because that was just my choice.
What's your system? What's your system?
System now is, honestly, I'm fading out of the business and I'm just slowly working only with people that I know and I'm not chasing any new business.
And how do you keep track of them?
Phone and email mostly, and an occasional.
How do you organize?
Where do you put your
Your
notes on what you
contacts.
talk about? Yeah.
It's in my head, basically. Not
Okay.
many, there's several dozen left. And it's not, what I'm doing today is not an example for you.
Of course.
It's not an example.
But it is a way.
The simplicity of Peter's system, where if he filled up a whole page of notes and then he added a second page and a second binder, because he'd have 150 here and 150 there, and he would say, yeah, we haven't talked in 6 weeks, your kid was going to a baseball team or trying out for this and that and this, and he established person-to-personal connections. These postcards that I get are from, like I said, 25 to 30 different agents, and virtually no follow-up, no interest,
Okay.
other
So
than blasting out a postcard.
Drew's on the phone. Drew, can you tell us what system you use?
Wow, this is useful.
I've been using HubSpot. I think it's pretty efficient for being free.
Okay. You use HubSpot.
Okay. I'd like to say I use HubSpot all the time, but I don't, unfortunately.
Right.
But I'll tell you, it's something that's needed when you're building a database. Managing contacts and prospects, adding notes, or attaching documents. You can access it online anywhere.
So what's preventing you from using it?
Laziness. But I will tell you, my form of reminding myself is I do have a notepad online, and it's just implanted in my mind to just constantly open it. So, it's almost like a HubSpot.
Whatever works.
Yeah, whatever
Going back to Peter, he would pull out his binder and carry on with him all the
I
time.
can't imagine doing that.
It was so easy. The system was never down. He didn't need any babysitting.
But imagine there being a fire.
There was.
Imagine
Yeah.
someone stealing his binder.
Yeah,
Forgetting it somewhere.
maybe he made an extra copy. I don't know.
I hope
But
not.
there was never a fire. Nobody lost anything in those days. People were careful because there was a vested interest to be careful.
Of course.
And that was a major issue. So whether it's done, Salesforce advanced stuff or HubSpot or one of the paid services or in writing, as long as you keep it, because people will connect with you. See, the 25 or 30 people, let's say I wanted to sell a property, who would I choose? The one I have a connection with.
Of course.
And so if you establish a personal connection in this day and age of electronics, you'll beat out everybody else who just pays for 5,000 postcards to be sent out with a shotgun approach because they don't bother calling and following up. Why? Because they're lazy. Why? Because they don't have a vested interest to proceed. Because life's too good today. That's the conflict.
Well, I'll tell you, I constantly network. Even when I'm out with friends, I will talk about commercial real estate, and I'll remember their businesses, and I'll remember places that are available, and I'll, link other people together. So That's what I do.
And sometimes an interview of you for potential business isn't a formal interview. People have interviews that come in, they're properly addressed, you sit down, yes or no, something, no tie. That's BS. The real interviews in the real world are done unofficially and off the books. Those are where the connections are made.
That's right.
And if sooner, yeah.
Keep going, keep going.
Okay, so let's identify prospecting techniques. Luca, do you happen to have any techniques?
For prospecting,
That's right.
call me old-fashioned. I like doing a little bit of research on who I'm going to be targeting and then knocking on the door. Also, a lot like yourself, I look out for people in my day-to-day life that, they say those magic words that kind of just flip a switch in your head and you're like, oh, you got what property? Like, how is that going? What are your plans with it? Also, as far as targeting, you join forums and groups in the neighborhood that this property is at. Just casually put the word out there, like the one we have under Visadera. Desirable place, so I reached out to the universities, campuses, because they could use, medical office like that. As long as the neighborhoods need to be aware.
Those are great techniques. Some other ones are social media marketing, expired listings.
Why would a listing be expired? On sale.
Can't find a buyer, and the contract ends with the agent and the seller.
So if the agent isn't after the owner to extend the listing, there must be something with the property or between the relationship between the two.
That's right.
So if you have a
Well, I think that's kind of what happened with me. The former agent had the property for 9 months, no traction. Here I am. I have a lot of potentials, but nothing is written just yet. So, preparing a commercial listing presentation. So you really want to ask some insightful questions like, what made you want to sell the property? Are you the only one making the decision to list and sell? Have you put the property on the market before? What do you think the value of the property is? Are there any other brokers submitting listing proposals? You want to tell them about you and your qualifications. You want to review the property. Some good elements of good presentations include table of contents, executive summary, a market overview, a comparative market analysis, property analysis, maybe including cap rates and talking about your commission. Any recommendations, your marketing campaign, your company's profile, and if you have any testimonials from clients, that's really important. Sometimes you'll have sellers wanting you to sign an NDA because of their confidentiality. If they, have some financials that they don't want anyone to just happen to see without signing an NDA.
Did you prepare a presentation for the brainwashed property?
Surprisingly not. It was, again, on a whim. I knew someone who referred me. I really, really like that type of networking. Just getting referrals, just like Doran apparently.
So do most owners. Owners don't want to sit through some presentation like this. They've been sold something. And this is a good learning for everybody, and I wish everybody else was here. One super important thing that sometimes doesn't get brought up in presentations is what does the owner intend to do after the sale with the proceeds? Pay a tax or do an exchange? Many naive first-time owners think, oh, I'm going to make all this money. Then they go talk to their accountant, and in the middle of the transaction and near the end they say, let's put a hold on this because I have to pay 40% in tax. Right. So get a little bit familiar with California, assuming it's here. There's federal tax of 20, there's state tax of 13, there's Obama tax of 3.8, and then there's recapture of depreciation. Get familiar with what all that means. And
Unless you do a 1031.
Unless you do a 1031, and what percentage of 1031s actually go through? A tiny
20.
fraction. A tiny fraction.
10%, 15, what?
I think it's like
3?
25, like 25%.
Oh.
So a tiny fraction go through.
Okay.
So learn about taxes, learn about depreciation.
Taxes, depreciation,
What was the other thing?
and then there's taxes, recapture of depreciation. Anything else? What did I say? Taxes.
Recapture, taxes, depreciation.
40% tax. It's about 39% tax of
So
your gain.
Those
Of your
4
gain.
points.
That really sucks.
Well, as somebody would say, everybody has to pay their fair share, especially the rich. There's also what are called DSTs, Delaware Statutory Trusts. Important to know about those. Those you don't get a commission on, but you might get the listing on it. If you tell the owner, you can buy, instead of one 1031 exchange, a piece of 10 buildings and let somebody manage it for you. There's no headache anymore. And you get a 5% return. You, as a broker, get no commission on this,
Why would
but
you
you get the
recommend
sale. Because you
okay.
get the sale. Because
Okay.
he might, once an owner realizes he has to kick in 40% of his gain, especially in San Francisco, that's insane. 1532 Harrison Street, these guy's uncle bought for $500 in 1960 when he got to San Francisco. They had a spare $500 and they bought the lot at 1532 Harrison Street, and I sold it for $8 million a couple of years ago.
So
Yeah.
the piece of, they get a piece of the 1031 exchange, but you don't get a commission, is that what you said?
No, the way, these are securities,
Uh-huh.
Delaware Statutory
Yeah.
Trust, and you put in all into one property, or you
Right.
can divide, sometimes they have 100,000 minimums, or 250,
Right.
250,000 minimums, and you can buy, depending on the money, it's good to spread your money around, because they manage it.
Mhm.
If one goes under and one tenant goes under, you're okay. If you buy some building in Oroville and the tenant goes out, you're done.
What was the thing about the commission?
There are no commissions. This DST operators do not pay brokers commissions
Ah,
because these are securities. And we're not, and they just don't pay. So there's no commission involved. So Maya Genie said, why would we do this? Because when we bring this to the attention of a potential seller who says, oh my God, 40%, forget it, and they're a little older and they don't want to manage properties anymore, you get about a 5% return. You invest in a bunch of properties. There is a 1031 element here, and there's nothing to do. They'll go, thank you, Maya, where have you been all my life? I can't wait to tell all my friends. Because usually wealthy people hang out with other wealthy people. What do they talk about? How to protect their money.
so the agent earns the commission on selling the,
You're in the
Into the-
commission selling the
into-
property,
Yeah.
not
Not go-
referring out to a DST.
yeah.
Right.
Delaware Statutory Trust. Now, what's the rest of
Right.
the...
But the more education you have, the better control you also have.
The more value you are to these folks, to the owners.
Right.
And you're dealing with high net worth individuals who value real service and time, and they don't like to be sold because they've been sold forever and ever. It just turns off when they see a presentation. This is wonderful for us, but most
I'm
owners
glad.
don't deal with it.
So preparing a market overview and analysis. Again, the more knowledge you obtain about the market, the better you'll be in control of the listing and selling process. I put down here NAR because NAR has a lot of free surveys that you can use to give to your sellers, like the commercial real estate lending survey, real estate marketing surveys. There are statistics and trends. I think I have.
How do you get those?
Just type in NAR. You'll see somewhere on that website.
You don't have to log in
reports.
or anything?
Not on NAR, but on Marcus and Millichap, which also provides marketing reports. This one I had to create an account for, but it was just an example of submarkets: San Francisco, Santa Clara, East Bay. This one I just found online.
What about CoStar? No?
I haven't really skimmed through CoStar's marketing, but I believe they do have that.
Oh, you missed the one with
The
Audrey.
new update
Oh yeah, you gotta
is actually
Oh.
nice.
sales
Oh.
data, humongous, right?
Well, there's that too.
Game
Sales
changer.
counts, yeah.
Game changer for sure.
Game.
See, you have to spend a week doing a report that today you get in 5 minutes,
Yeah,
That's right.
and
which is
Yeah.
good.
it's already built in, CoStar.
The problem is it's available to everybody. In the old days, only a few people went through the process of doing this, and the owners really liked them.
And that's what set them apart.
I mean, even
That's what set them apart. In the days before DocuSign, you actually went over and had to drive and go over something with somebody, and today in the future, I do.
Well, don't you think it's better to show up in person?
No question, because despite all this electronic BS that's out there today, and people staring at the screens all day long, face-to-face, you can't substitute for that. And why don't people do that? Because it's too much effort.
They're not used to it, too.
Or a whole generation, no offense here, guys, can't do it. They can't do it. It's a major issue. I don't want to use any unpleasant words, but they can't do it. And if you can, you have a leg up on the rest of them.
Mhm.
You really do.
going back to analytics, yeah, our generation does have all these tools accessible now. Right? Even like the majority of us actually use them. It's a lot easier to get these analytics and charts now, but I think I speak for a lot of us when I say it's not being utilized.
Do you think it's because people are afraid of being asked questions of what things are
I
on
think they're just
the...
overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
We're fortunate enough to have CoStar come in and show us, walk us through it. But a lot of people are like, this looks way advanced. I'm just going to keep it simple, but it's right there in front of them. They've got access to it.
Okay, so preparing a property evaluation. There are two types of buyers you want to keep in mind when thinking of property evaluation, sorry. One is owner-occupant, which are owner users who use the property they acquire for their own business purposes. Things to look for in a property for an owner user are price per square foot, location, zoning, parking ratio, traffic count. There's plenty more, building condition. Another one is an investor who is seeking the highest return for dollars invested. They focus on cash return, which is the money you make back off of the money you put out. Appreciation, increase in value, inflation, location. They also look at net cash flow, which is the difference between money coming in and expenses. When doing a property evaluation, you want to look at its condition, historical performance, cap rates. Who knows how to figure out a cap rate? Doran, Luca.
I just rehearsed this with Judy.
Wait a minute, come on. Nobody knows that.
You take the income and put it against all of the expenses, or the equation, I guess, would be income divided by expenses.
Less. What do you subtract? What doesn't count in the cap rate?
Expenses.
The mortgage.
Expenses.
The expenses are separate and above that because the mortgage can be different for everybody. And so a cap rate is the actual return on your actual investment. Example.
Yeah, your income over your value becomes your cap rate. Or to figure out the value of the property, it's income divided by the cap rate.
So mortgage is separate.
It is. For example, let's say you have $150,000 annual net income. And I'll say this and then give it. And if it's a 5 cap, multiply that by 20, it's a $3 million building. Here's the question. $150,000 example income is current income for the current seller or
Potential?
going to be your net income? Remember, the net income after property taxes. The difference here is property taxes. So many people will sell their property based on that 5 cap, based on the current income, based on 1976, 1979 property tax base. And in California, likely next year, that's going to change if the population votes to take Prop 13, commercial and residential, and split that. It's not a guarantee that will happen, but it's likely. Because of the residential, people are going to be scared to death because they'll be told, you want to keep your low taxes? Sure, just vote to tax the other guy.
So net cap rate is net income divided by value? Is that what you said?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a net income that you get
Uh-huh.
from a property.
Yeah.
And the cap rate, if it's a 8 or 9 cap rate, that's a risky situation. There are commercial properties in the city, apartments in Pacific Heights that will sell
For-
a
for-
3 cap.
For a seller,
Yeah, there's a 3 or 4 cap. Now, why would you buy a property with a 4 cap if the mortgage costs 4 and the property taxes are 2? It's about 6.5% to own the building. Just to figure out what the actual costs are of a building, property taxes, insurance, is 6.5%.
So do you think, and especially after Prop 13, do you think that even talking about cap rates is antiquated? Is there a point?
No, it'll be adjusted.
It'll be adjusted.
It'll be adjusted. If the current owner keeps his property, commercial property, and it gets reassessed, 4 or 5 Sansom Street. That group's owned that property since 1869. And leased
Oh my
up all the
gosh.
spaces in the building, nothing
Right.
there. And the property taxes, I think, are $2,000 a year on a $7 million building.
So you want a high cap rate when you're a buyer.
When you're a
Yes.
buyer, you want a high cap.
Yeah.
And okay, there's some other issues with a cap rate. Mort and I were working with somebody that insisted on a 10 cap.
Mhm.
She was crazy. She needed the money. It was her 100th sale. She was 90 years old, and she wanted a 10 cap. Just for one time in her life, she wanted a 10 cap.
Right.
You know, some people, you know, pierce their ears or do pink hair or get tattoos. She wanted a 10 cap. You know. So Mort and I found her one in Utah. Relatively risky, but sort of risk-free. Tenant went under, the property value cut in half. So from a 5 cap, a 10 cap, now it's maybe a 5 cap. That's all it was worth. So what was the issue? The tenant. So on an investment property, the tenant's a huge issue. And there's one thing with a cap rate that's not quite there. You can see the history there, condition. Deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance is a huge issue. Many people will dump a property when the deferred maintenance gets out of hand. Okay, Rich went, and you all went to Colorado recently to look at a property for sale. And it was a beautiful property. It was 25 years old. Air conditioning 25, roof 25, everything's 25. Time for replacement. The owner wanted to dump it, but it still looked very nice. So you've got to then get inspections involved. Everybody familiar with the AIR 2-page commercial disclosure?
property evaluation,
Yeah, that the owner
Yes.
signs.
yes.
No, in residential, there are way more forms, but for us, it's just that 2-page form. If you're not familiar with it, sort of memorize it, have it around. We used to carry these around all the time just to talk to owners, not to scare them, but just to say any buyer would want to deal with this stuff. Because you want to ask about things that are on there in advance before you take the listing, like easements.
Before taking the listing,
Before taking the listing, ask if there's any issues that could come up later. Maybe they'll tell you, maybe they won't, because they want to hide it, because maybe it'll never be found out. 350 Treat Street. Got the listing signed, and went to the building, all the stuff that was in front of the wall was removed, and I noticed the inner studs of a building, then there was an inside wall, it was white flaky powdery stuff. It was all the way around 100% asbestos. And they couldn't get rid of it without tearing down the building. So I said, sorry guys, I can't deal with this. And the owner says, you're fired anyway.
Yeah.
And he put sheetrock and covered it up. And it's still there, all asbestos. Here's the problem. I know that. I'm not going to turn him in, but what if he really pissed me off? I would. Leverage. Sorry for taking up so
That's
much of
okay.
your time.
So let's talk about listing a commercial property for sale. There are a few types of listing agreements. I'm going to ask you guys which one is the most important one for us. One is exclusive right to sell listing agreement and agency disclosure. The other is exclusive agency listing agreement. And another is open listing agreement. Which one do we want to have?
Repeat that again?
Exclusive right to sell listing agreement and agency disclosure, exclusive agency listing agreement, or open listing agreement.
That's no fun. I rehearsed with her. She already knows.
It's like a
You
marriage.
can't say that.
It's like you're getting married. What do you want?
Hey. No, not in marriage. But
Exclusive?
That's right. It's an exclusive right to sell listing agreement and agency disclosure, which means no matter how the property is sold, who sells it, you get the commission. Can anyone tell me what an open listing agreement is?
Drew?
Nate?
Nate?
Drew?
Open?
Open listing agreement.
What, an open listing agreement?
Yes.
Anyone?
Yeah, so it's basically a free-for-all. So whoever brings the tenant who wants to sign gets the commission. And if you're, like, that's what I had for 451 Hayes. So essentially, I was pouring in multiple times. We got really deep on a couple potential deals. They fell through, and then next thing you know, someone else ended up touring another tenant who wanted to sign, and I lost the listing, I guess, but
This is for a
technically
sale,
it was
though, right?
never mine. First place.
Well, I mean, it's the same. It's almost the
Just
same
for
thing.
lease.
Same for sale and lease?
And for residential.
Okay.
Would
There
you
are
ever,
also
Would you ever take an open listing?
no.
Yes.
I would not.
If there's no other, or like if it is
They don't want-
completely.
There's a one big
out.
if.
You're wasting your time.
You're probably, most likely you're wasting your time, except what if you ask the owner, because most owners know that giving out an open listing isn't really to the benefit of the broker. What they're trying to do is get 4 or 5 brokers working for them for free, and you can say, nobody's going to be doing any marketing if somebody else is going to do the deal. You know that.
Right.
You're okay with that, yes or no? And if he is, yeah, that's fine. I expect all of you guys to just get really hungry and go find a tenant, and I'll pay a full commission. He signs an open listing, you get 6% or 5%, you don't split the fee. Then ask him if you can put up the sign. Worst case scenario, you get a sign,
Right.
which gets you to cold call that neighborhood. We have a listing. Don't say open list. We have a listing on this building, our sign's on there, and go get some more business out of it.
So only do an open if you can put a sign in.
Yes,
Otherwise,
open
don't.
with a sign. Otherwise,
What if you're confident? What if
Yeah,
you're
no.
confident that you could bring in a buyer? Then you're gonna have to work. You don't have a listing on it at all. So
Well, then you'd
It's
want to
better
have a
than
buyer's agreement, a buyer representation agreement.
right, but you could be on the buyer and listing side.
what an owner would also try one more thing. What if he has 3 open listings out to various 3 brokers? He's going to want to see which one really hustles the most for the first month, because he knows, Mr. Owner, I've been open, it's still vacant, it's still not sold, a month has gone by, I brought by 4 people, how much time do you want to waste before you give somebody an exclusive?
Right.
And he wants to see which one is the hungriest to go after it. So don't necessarily turn it down, but use it as, because when you first get started, your first listing, your first sign, your first 2, 3, 5 signs, take almost at any cost.
Right.
Hans and I our training was not this extensive. The entire training Hans and I got in the business was less time than we did this morning. Bruce would have a bunch of signs and say, there's a sign, go buy your own tape, you so-and-sos, and get out of here and come back with the fact that you put it up someplace. Don't come back till I have a listing of some kind. And that was it. We just walked around with signs all day long. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. Seriously, we had no idea what we were doing. We were just winging it. And half the fun of this business is winging it. Once you know a little bit about what the mechanics are.
Right.
So, sorry.
That's okay. Agency agreements. Can anyone tell me what a limited agency agreement is? I'm sorry, a limited agent agreement. Ever heard of it? I'll tell you.
Ask Mark.
Mark,
Welcome.
welcome.
Dr. Carnegie.
Can you tell me what a limited agent agreement is?
Not
Stop
off,
there.
not off the top of my head, but I have an idea of what it is.
What is it? What's your idea?
A limited, what's the question again?
What is a limited agent agreement?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
It's
Go
a
ahead,
legally
hit
binding
me.
contract acknowledging that the agent involved is representing both seller and buyer.
Mm.
There's also another agency agreement, which is the dual agency agreement, and it's used when one agent of a brokerage firm represents the seller and another agent of the same brokerage represents the buyer.
Uh-huh.
When this happens, both agents are known as dual agents.
Isn't that the first thing you described just now? Also
Yeah.
dual
That's
agency.
when you
Limited agent represents both seller and buyer.
Right.
Dual agent agency is when
Dual,
two agents in the same brokerage are representing buyer and seller.
my understanding was that dual agency meant that you have a fiduciary duty to the buyer and the seller.
Yeah.
That's dual agency.
That makes
That's
sense.
true. Dual agency is fraught with danger because you really can't represent two people.
You've got your
Legally, you can't. No, legal profession, you can. And
But you get paid more, so why not?
you get paid more.
It's a joke.
So that's limited agent agreement.
Yeah, for now it's here. There are pushes out in the legal world to get rid of dual agency, even within the same office.
because your fiduciary duty is to find
Yeah.
your seller the highest price at the same time get your buyer the lowest price.
Yeah.
Right?
Why it works here in this area is as the prices keep going up, the sellers normally are just happy to get these massive numbers, and the buyers are usually sophisticated, know what they're doing, and they're happy to pay these high numbers. So it almost doesn't matter. You know, the Tom Murphys of the world are happy to pay these stupid prices. And he pays insanely stupid prices for stuff because he knows he can sell for more later. So the objection to dual agency will come up in a flat market or in a market that's flat that's dropping. Because if somebody buys a property and finds out later it's suddenly the market crashes to 20% less, they're not happy. They're going to look around for, they didn't tell me about this deferred maintenance, they didn't tell me about this and this and this. And that's why it's critical on the sale to have that 2-page AIR form filled out way in advance. Right when you take the listing, the owner can write in, don't know, don't know, don't know, but he has to sign it. And you don't know because it's not your property. And they have to do it. If they refuse to do it, then tell them, just write don't know on anything, but you gotta have this done.
Is that what you meant by dual agency?
What I meant by dual agency is one agent in a brokerage representing the seller, and then another agent in the same brokerage
Right.
representing the buyer.
It's all dual agency.
Well, there's more to it, but this is
Yeah.
kind of like the
that the same?
definition.
Yes. It's all dual agency.
Okay. So pretty much the broker in this situation is a dual agent in the fact that it represents a buyer and seller. Now say if it was an agent for one brokerage and one from another representing the buyer and seller respectively, that's not dual agency
Right.
because there's two brokers involved.
Technically, Starboard is the broker.
Right.
Yeah.
And two
Brokerage.
agents at Starboard, or one agent at Starboard representing both sides, dual agent.
Yeah, okay,
The broker is the dual agent,
Yeah.
not the individual.
I see. Thank you.
Right. That's why it's called dual agency agreement, not agent. Okay,
Good.
so last one, the commercial real estate selling process. For one, two important agreements are used when you're working with buyers. A buyer's representation agreement and a cooperating broker agreement. A cooperating broker agreement is representing a buyer, but someone may come in with a tenant and you agree to share the commission. And another thing to keep in mind is you want to use a letter of intent, which is non-binding. Most of the time, a buyer will submit a letter of intent just to get the deal points in before a sale agreement, which involves an attorney, and it gets complicated.
What's a letter of intent?
It's a non-binding offer, and it lists all of the deal points that both parties agree on. Sometimes a seller would counter offer. Sometimes the buyer would counter the counter offer, and it can go on until they both finally agree to the terms. Without this letter of intent, you're going to spend a lot of time and money in the process if both parties don't agree.
Do they have to sign it?
Yes.
Who?
The seller and the buyer.
Because the signed letter of intent with the deal points is what's used literally word for word to put into a binding agreement, which is the CAR
lease
or
agreement.
AIR form.
Yep.
And then it's bad faith and bad form, but people do it all the time anyway to change the terms. I know
Without
we agreed on
signing.
4 million, but the market's changed and I'm going to pay 3.5. Sorry, but that's the result of using a letter of intent instead of immediately getting to a purchase agreement. If you have a purchase agreement at $4 million and the market crashes and it's only worth 3.5, then you can change your mind on an inspection or something else. Which is why the seller wants the shortest time frame where there's still a way to get out of the deal. And the buyer wants the longest time frame to leverage their interest. And frequently a buyer does not have the money. They want to tie up a property, they go find investors, and then for the special skill and art of finding the property, they'll take a 3 or 5% fee and flip the property to somebody else, and that's how they make their living. Which is why Luca, very smart, before you engage with somebody, do a bit of research and find out what they do. When you look up Tom Murphy, you'll find out his nickname is the Rat.
Sounds promising.
Yes. But he does buy properties.
There.
Sorry, I didn't mean that. Tom will laugh when I say that. But that's his nickname.
Okay. So what are the two important agreements?
What is what?
A buyer's representation agreement and a cooperating broker agreement.
Do we have this?
Sure.
Did you use this?
I don't think many people use it.
Well,
I'll tell you this,
yeah,
honestly,
yeah, yeah.
it would be really nice to have a buyer representation agreement, but it's the same thing as tenant repping. Not everyone has a tenant signing an
Most
agreement.
Most won't.
Right. So
Most
most
buyers
won't.
won't.
Yeah,
Most
most
buyers
buyers won't either.
Won't, because from their point of view, if they're sophisticated, they may do that or not. Their idea, the Tom Murphys of the world, you find me a property that's not listed, and I'll pay you a 2% fee. That's the standard MO of buying real estate. in
But
San
most of the
Francisco.
time, buyers are not paying commission.
The sophisticated, smart buyers are, and most of the deals work that way.
Good to know.
Because by the time a property is listed for sale and a few weeks and months go by, all of the really sophisticated, smart sellers have picked it up and have looked at it and decided to pass on it.
So majority of the time, a buyer ends up paying commission if there are off-market deals.
Yes,
Got
if
it.
not all the times. All the times. Because it's not on the market and the buyers know that this is what they're expected to do because the seller says, I'm not that motivated. Otherwise, they'd sell it. That's what Craig's specialty is, if you ever hear him on the phone. He asks people, what are your plans for the building? Would you look at an offer? And never asks them about a fee. Sometimes they go, what's the fee? No fee to you. Our exclusive buyers are working with us. Exclusive? They're not exclusive. But our buyers will pay us a fee, meaning we're working with serious people that might make you a serious offer. You have nothing to lose by looking at an offer. And many of these sellers aren't sellers. They just enjoy the process. And again, what Luca does is he looks up to see how many buildings they own and see if they enjoy playing the game. On occasion, life circumstances change. And they end up selling when they don't intend to. And if you're continuously connecting with them like Maya does, with personal connections, they'll pick you over somebody else that sends them postcards or letters or works for Marcus and Millichap or one of the bigger houses because they feel more humanly comfortable with you. And that's this whole thing, is if they feel humanly comfortable with you, they'll work with you. Subject to you showing them that you can actually know the mechanics of the business. I don't know if that was clear.
Very clear.
Good. That's the summary of the morning.
And that's the conclusion of my lesson on how to list and sell commercial real estate.
Yay!
Thank you.
Yes.